Hey guys, tonight we travel to a world where chocolate isn't a sweet snack, but a bitter, sacred, and frothy ritual where people believe the bubbles carried prayers and power, and spilling a drop could offend the gods. You're about to step barefoot into a humid, leaf-draped jungle, with howler monkeys screaming from the canopy and the earthy scent of cacao pulp thick in your nose. This is the land of the ancient Maya, where chocolate didn't just satisfy, it sanctified. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this if you're not into spicy, room-temperature beverages with the consistency of thin soup and the zing of chili peppers. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you re-listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trudging through a dense Mesoamerican forest trail, damp with dew and scattered with fallen cacao pods, oblong, ribbed fruits the color of sunset. They crunch slightly underfoot as you walk. Nearby, a boy no older than 12 crouches with a machete, cracking open one of the pods. Inside, not chocolate bars or truffles, just a gooey white pulp and some unremarkable beans. You wrinkle your nose, but he grins and hands you one. You suck it tentatively. It's tangy, tropical, almost lychee-like. Definitely not what you expected. This is the raw material of an empire, not only physically, in trade and tribute, but spiritually, in myth and ceremony. Theobroma cacao, the food of the gods. The Maya weren't being poetic. They meant it literally. You follow the boy into his village. Thatched roofs, dogs barking, smoke rising from clay stoves. On a central altar, a beautifully painted ceramic vessel sits, filled nearly to the brim with dark liquid, thick, rich, and crowned with a high collar of bubbly foam that glistens in the sun. You're not offered a spoon. You're told to drink. You do, and it's startling, bitter, smoky, a little sour. Not what your taste buds expect at bedtime, but undeniably complex. And the froth, it tickles your upper lip, almost like whipped air. That froth, you'll learn, is everything. Without it, the drink isn't finished, it isn't worthy, it isn't alive. Foam in ancient Mesoamerican cacao wasn't a garnish, it was the main event. A drink without it was like a birthday party without the candles. And unlike your modern latte, where a steamer does the job in seconds, frothing back then was an Olympic event. You had to earn those bubbles. You watch as an elder woman prepares a new batch. She roasts cacao beans on a comal, that flat clay griddle you've seen in taco joints. The smell is intoxicating, earthy, nutty, almost musky. Once cooled, she peels the shells by hand, revealing the shiny inner nibs. Then comes the grind. She kneels beside a heavy stone slab called a metate, and with rhythmic, practiced strokes, she pushes a stone roller back and forth, pulverizing the beans into a smooth, warm paste. This isn't a quick job. You'd need serious forearm strength and core stability, honestly, to keep this up. You try, just once, and nearly fall face first into the paste. She laughs kindly. This paste is the base, but to turn it into a drink, she needs liquid. Water, mostly, sometimes maize or honey. Often chili peppers or achiote for color and bite. But even after mixing, it's still not chocolate until it's frothy. And for that, she does something unexpected. She lifts the bowl above her head and pours it into another from an impressive height, letting it cascade down like a waterfall. Then again, and again, each time, the stream thickens with air, bubbles clustering, building. Miss the bowl, and the gods might frown. Splash too hard, and you'll lose the precious drink. There's an art to it, a tempo. Pour too slowly, no bubbles. Too fast, no accuracy. You start to realize, this isn't just cooking, this is choreography. The boy joins in, showing off a version of the technique, more acrobatic, less accurate. One splash lands at your feet. They all laugh. You pretend not to take offense. Foam, in Maya cosmology, was more than aesthetic. It represented breath, spirit, the animating force of life. Some priests believed the froth connected this world to the next, like a bubbly portal. When they offered cacao to the gods, they didn't just pour it, they froth poured it. Some vessels even had special spouts to optimize bubble generation. Historians still argue whether this was purely symbolic, or whether the added aeration actually changed the drink's perceived taste and mouthfeel, like how champagne tastes flatter once the fizz is gone. One theory suggests the foam helped mix ingredients that naturally separated oil from water, spice from sediment. Another posits that foam was simply fun. Think birthday milkshakes or bubble baths. Some pleasures are eternal, but it wasn't all lofty ritual. Froth had class connotations, too. Elites got more of it. Servants often drank the flat dregs. To sip the foam first was like being handed the champagne toast before the wedding even started. At banquets, the host might perform the high pour himself as a status flex. Look at my coordination, peons. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Maya even had a word for the perfect foam texture, a bit like how Italians obsess over al dente. The ideal froth was thick but light, voluminous but stable. Not unlike a good hair day. You recline in the shade, sipping more of the foamy brew. The jungle hums. The air is thick but slow-moving. A parrot mutters something rude from a tree. You wipe chocolate froth from your lip and wonder who figured all this out. Who first realized that bitter paste and bubbling water could become divine? The villagers speak of ancestors, of spirits guiding their hands. But deep down, you know the answer is simpler. Someone got bored one day and started pouring things from one bowl to another and liked what they saw. The boy from the village motions for you to follow again, this time off the path and deeper into the humid heart of the forest. Mosquitoes hover in lazy clouds, vines hang low like nature's version of booby traps, and the air gets denser with every step. You push past leaves bigger than your torso, and then you see it. Nestled between the buttress roots of an enormous tree are clusters of cacao pods, their bumpy skins streaked yellow, orange, even crimson. The tree stands about 20 feet high, but the fruit grows directly from the trunk and lower branches, like the tree itself is growing warts made of magic. It doesn't look like a chocolate factory. It looks like something that would try to eat you in a video game. This is Theobroma cacao, the wild version, the ancestral plant that launched 1,000 ceremonies and at least one global addiction. It wasn't domesticated overnight. The earliest known cultivation goes back nearly 3,500 years, possibly earlier, in what's now modern Honduras and southern Mexico. But the wild stuff, it likely existed long before humans realized it could be tamed, brewed, and worshipped. You reach out, cautiously, and pluck one of the riper pods. It's firm, heavier than it looks, and smells faintly fruity with just a whisper of funk. You crack it open using a rock because your fingernails are, tragically, not machete grade, revealing rows of beans enrobed in sticky pulp. The beans are bitter. The pulp is weirdly delicious. The boy grins. Food of the gods, he says, or something like it. You nod like you understand because, spiritually, you kind of do. Now here's the twist. Chocolate wasn't tea originally food in the way we think of it. You couldn't bite into a cacao bean like an almond. You'd probably break a tooth. Early Mesoamericans figured out that the magic was unlocked through processing. Drying, roasting, grinding, each step revealed more flavor, more aroma, more ritual potential. And no, they didn't always figure this out through a divine dream. Sometimes they probably just dropped beans in the fire by accident and said, "Wait a second." Scientists believe that even earlier societies, possibly the Olmecs, were the first to experiment with cacao. Archaeological evidence of cacao residue has been found on pottery dating back to 1500 BCE. The Olmecs may have used the beans more medicinally than recreationally, though no one's ruling out the possibility that they, too, liked a good buzz and a bubble or two. Historians still debate which civilization first figured out how to consistently cultivate the plant. The Maya definitely get credit for systematizing its use, for weaving it into religion, daily life, and the all-important froth game. But the tree's geographic origin might go even further south, maybe as far as the Amazon basin, long before it became the darling of Mesoamerican elite. Cacao trees are picky. They need constant warmth, high humidity, and shade. You can't grow them just anywhere, and in the wild, their pods don't ripen at the same time, so harvesters had to be selective, strategic. You picture someone wandering through this jungle 2,000 years ago with a basket and a dream, examining every pod like a gem dealer at a market. That's where the reverence starts. When something takes that much effort to find, and it tastes that unique, it earns its mystique. Add a few shamanic rituals and some celestial symbolism, and suddenly, you've got a plant that becomes a pillar of civilization. Quirky fact break: there's a legend in some Maya communities that cacao trees only bear fruit if you speak kindly to them. One grumpy morning, no pods, say please and thank you, and boom, fruit explosion. Could be superstition, could be an early experiment in positive plant psychology. Either way, it's sweet. You sit at the base of the cacao tree and take it all in. The way the vines curl around the trunks. The hum of distant cicadas, the slow drip of humidity off every leaf. If chocolate came from here, it makes sense why it tastes like it does, layered, deep, moody, and not afraid of a little bitterness. Beside you, the boy digs a shallow hole and buries a few leftover beans. He pats the earth gently, almost ceremonially. You ask why. He shrugs and says something about new life, about feeding the forest what it gave. You smile, suddenly unsure whether this is a farming technique or low-key religious practice. Probably both. Chocolate, here, was never just about consumption. It was a full-circle affair, from seed to ceremony to sacrifice. Yes, we're getting to that later. It was infused with meaning at every stage. A cacao pod wasn't just a pod. It was a miniature universe, an object of cosmic symmetry, full of sacred geometry, and enough seeds to start a new world. And here's the kicker: cacao trees don't self-pollinate easily. They rely on tiny midges, minuscule flies that are so small they could walk through the eye of a sewing needle. Without these unsung heroes, the chocolate supply chain collapses. Not jaguars, not priests, not conquistadors. Just tiny bugs doing awkward bug stuff in flower petals the size of your thumbnail. Historians still argue whether the Maya tried to manage these midges or if they just trusted the jungle to handle its own business. There's no record of cacao pollination farms, but given the Maya's obsession with calendars and cycles, it wouldn't be surprising if they had a bug-based algorithm for harvest timing. Back in the village, as twilight rolls in, the community gathers for a quiet ceremony. They bring out a fresh batch of roasted, ground cacao and mix it with water and a bit of cornmeal. The smell alone could knock you into a nostalgic coma: smoky, earthy, nutty, slightly sweet. Everyone takes turns pouring the mixture from one vessel to another. The children cheer at the tallest pours. The elders nod approvingly when the foam towers without collapsing. It's not just skill, it's style. One last fact for your sleepy brain: modern researchers have recreated ancient cacao groves using satellite imagery and soil analysis. Some of these wild-growing trees, they're direct descendants of those first sacred groves. Which means the chocolate you had earlier could be linked, genetically, to the drink served to a Maya king 1,500 years ago. You lie back on the soft, mossy ground beneath the cacao tree. The stars peek through the canopy. Somewhere, a jaguar growls in the distance. The boy snores beside you. And for a moment, as cacao-infused dreams start to bubble up in your head, you wonder if trees could remember. What stories would they whisper? The next morning, you wake to the scent of smoke and sizzling masa. Somewhere nearby, someone is roasting tortillas over a clay griddle, and the smell sends your stomach into a grumbly little tantrum. But you're not here for breakfast tacos, not yet. Today, you're headed to the grinding stones. Time to turn beans into paste, and paste into something resembling the frothy elixir of the gods. You follow a narrow footpath into the heart of the village, where three women sit on the ground, each positioned before a metate, the ancient grinding stone, slightly sloped and supported by three stubby legs. It looks like the child of a coffee table and a surfboard. They each wield a mano, a thick cylindrical roller stone that they push rhythmically, back and forth, over freshly roasted cacao nibs. The sound is mesmerizing, a low, gritty rasp, like sandpaper on velvet. It's the sound of history being made, one grind at a time. You try it, you last 40 seconds before your shoulders scream mutiny. Your arms have the consistency of overcooked noodles. The paste, when it forms, is shiny and thick, almost black, warm from the friction. It smells like smoke, nuts, and the faintest hint of bitterness. Not sweet, not dessert. This is cacao at its most elemental. Grinding cacao on a metate is no small task. It takes time, skill, and endurance. Historians still argue whether this was mostly women's work by custom, by sacred tradition, or by some mix of both and necessity. What's clear is this: whoever controlled the metate controlled the magic. And that meant power culinary, cultural, even spiritual. The process isn't just mechanical. There's a tempo, a rhythm almost musical. Your guide tells you some families pass down metate techniques like lullabies. A grandmother's grind had a signature sound, and you could tell who was working from 3 houses away. You smile at the idea of cacao-based Morse code echoing through the jungle. Now here's a quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found ancient metates buried with their owners, suggesting they were so personal, so essential that they went to the grave with them. No judgment. If you've ever had a favorite blender or coffee grinder, you get it. Back at the hearth, the women begin combining the paste with water. Not too much. They eyeball it expertly, like grandmas everywhere. Stirring slowly, they add crushed chilies, some roasted cornmeal, and for the elite palate a touch of annatto for color. No sugar. That wouldn't exist here for another few centuries. The result is thick, warm, and still very much unfinished, because again, no foam, no glory. The main way to froth a chocolate drink at this stage is through pouring. You watch as one of the women lifts her clay bowl chest high, then tips it carefully into another vessel set below. The stream arches mid-air, breaking up as it falls until it lands with a satisfying splash and begins to foam. They repeat the motion again and again. Sometimes they miss. Sometimes the mixture splashes dramatically. No one gets mad. That's part of the art. If this sounds exhausting, you're right, but it's also mesmerizing. There's something trance-like about the way the bubbles build and shift, micro-mountains rising on the surface, shimmering with heat. It's not unlike watching latte art, but make it ancient and way more dramatic. Historians still argue whether the foam served a purely ceremonial role or if it actually affected the chemical makeup of the drink. Some researchers claim that introducing air changed the way fats and compounds interacted, making the drink smoother or even unlocking different aromas. Others say that's just modern chocolate science projecting its feelings. But here's something science does support. The act of grinding cacao releases the theobromine and caffeine, both mild stimulants. Combine that with the frothing motion, constant physical movement, steady focus, and you basically have the ancient equivalent of a high-intensity workout followed by an espresso shot. The result: alertness, ritual energy, possibly mild euphoria. Basically, you become a cacao-powered wizard. You're invited to help grind a second batch. Your arms are not thrilled about this development, but your pride won't let you say no. The beans are roasted, aromatic, and crack under your fingers as you shell them. Then, onto the metate. Your first few passes are embarrassing. The paste goes everywhere. You somehow get cacao in your sleeve. A toddler laughs at you. But with some coaching, your rhythm improves. Back, press, forward, lift, scrape, repeat. The paste begins to form. You're sweating, your core is activated, and you're suddenly feeling deeply connected to something bigger than yourself, or possibly just deeply sore. A woman beside you chuckles and offers a drink from the previous batch. It's already cooled slightly, the foam clinging in ripples along the rim. You sip, and it's better than yesterday. Spicier, maybe. The flavor's more layered. Or maybe you're just learning to appreciate bitterness like some kind of highbrow hipster. Quirky aside, some early Maya elite flavored their cacao with flower petals, especially Palo de Rosa and Flata cacao, believing the aroma added sensual and spiritual depth. Basically, ancient aphrodisiac lattes. You look at your cup, just chilly today, probably for the best. Another child approaches with something different, a special pot with a narrow neck and long spout. She lifts it and pours from even higher, managing to get a perfect arc into the cup below with barely a splash. This isn't just drinking, it's theater. These specialty vessels weren't just pretty. Some had internal ridges designed to enhance froth as liquid was poured out. Others had double chambers to separate sediment from the foam layer. You stare in awe, then promptly fail to mimic the motion and nearly coat yourself in hot chocolate. Applause, you're officially part of the entertainment. Eventually, the grinding slows, the bowls are full, and the day's foam is deemed acceptable. Everyone gathers around a small fire, elders, toddlers, guests. Each receives a small gourd filled with the dark, spicy brew. No sugar, no whipped cream, no marshmallows, just rich, bitter, ceremonial cacao and a shared moment. You sip, foam clinging again to your lips, and feel something shift. Not just in your stomach, which is slightly confused, but in your mind. You're starting to understand why this was more than just a beverage. Why people would grow, grind, and pour until their backs ached. Why the foam had to be just right, because here, chocolate isn't just something you consume. It's something you become part of. Afternoon slinks in like a sleepy jaguar, shadows stretching long across the village square. The air is sticky and heavy, like it's been steeped in warm molasses. You're guided to the edge of a courtyard where two men stand facing each other, clay vessels in hand. One lifts his arm, extends the pot high overhead, and begins to pour. The arc of liquid seems impossibly high, nearly 6 feet from lip to lip, and it's not just theatrical. The liquid lands in the receiving vessel with a splash and begins to foam furiously. You take a step closer, almost hypnotized. The other man takes his turn, lifting his pot even higher. It's less about pouring and more about performance. This is the competitive spirit of ancient cacao frothing, and yes, there was flair, pride, and probably a fair amount of spillage. But the goal was always the same, to coax the most luscious, towering foam from the drink. This wasn't just showboating, it was engineering by gravity. In Maya, and later Aztec culture, this type of high pour technique wasn't limited to a kitchen ritual. It often took place in markets, ceremonies, and homes of the elite. In some regions, contests were held for the best froth consistency and longevity. One trick: use freshly ground cacao and aged water just enough time to soften the bitterness, but keep the oils vibrant. And don't forget a steady hand and a strong shoulder. Triceps were apparently crucial in ancient beverage prep. You're handed your own set of vessels. The first pour is tragic. It goes sideways, literally. Some lands in the bowl, some lands in your sandal, some lands on your pride. A little girl giggles. She shows you how to brace the pouring vessel against her chest and use a slow tilt rather than a dramatic flop. Historians still argue whether the foaming technique developed primarily for religious purposes or simply as a method of emulsifying ingredients. Some scholars think it began as a practical step to get the oils, water, and solids to blend more evenly, especially once maize flour or chili was added. Others argue it was always about symbolism, height representing aspiration, foam as spirit, and the act of pouring a kind of dialogue between earth and sky. Whatever the origin, it caught on, big time. Frothing became the defining trait of chocolate drinks across the region. The higher and thicker the foam, the higher your social clout. Serving flat cacao was like offering warm soda at a wedding. Here's a quirky fact to store in your sleepy brain. Ancient art sometimes depicted cacao being poured by divine hands, as though the gods themselves cared about that perfect splash height. In some murals, you can spot these long arcs midair, frozen in time, proof that even 1,000 years ago, people knew how to stunt on their beverages. But there's another twist: frothing wasn't always done with vessels. In some regions, people used tools, hollowed out sticks or reeds, sometimes with crossbars or carved notches. They'd plunge them into the cacao and spin rapidly between their palms, creating a vortex of bubbles. A primitive whisk, and maybe the first step toward the invention of the famous molinillo. Back in the courtyard, a small group gathers to watch the frothing drama unfold. There's betting involved, not with coins, but with cacao beans, a friendly wager, the stakes. A gourd full of the winner's brew. You bet 1 bean. Because, yes, 1 bean is actually a unit of currency in this world. More on that in a bit. Your second pour is better. Less splash, more foam. You even get a small cheer from the crowd. You bow, theatrically. Someone tosses you a dried chili as a prize. You try not to question the value of your life decisions. You sit again under the awning of a hut, sipping what might be your 10th cup of the day. This one has corn in it, making it thicker, almost like a proto-smoothie. It sticks to the sides of the gourd. The foam is less bubbly, more creamy. It feels different, comforting, like drinking firewood and stone and summer all at once. There is a scholarly theory that this corn-cacao combo wasn't just a culinary choice, it was cosmological. Corn represented the body. Cacao represented the soul, mixed together. You were drinking the essence of being. That's a power smoothie if there ever was one. As you look around, you realize how central the act of pouring is, not just for texture, but for storytelling. A father teaches his son, An elder shows a younger woman how to balance the bowl. The arc of the pour becomes a bridge between generations. Technique becomes tradition. You're handed a special gourd with a jaguar carved into the rim. Your host explains this was for honored guests or for those being initiated into the cacao craft. You try not to blush under the weight of the attention or the heat or the 12% cacao concentration in your bloodstream. Just then, someone begins a song. It's low, rhythmic, more chant than melody. The words are ancient. You catch glimpses heart, earth, sky, breath, foam. Because yes, there were songs about frothing. Some were instructional, others were devotional. Some might have even been humorous, like the one where a mischievous god tries to impress a mortal woman by faking a foam arc and ends up spilling cacao on his loincloth. You try not to laugh and choke on your drink. It's a close call. Historians still argue whether frothing songs were sung during ritual ceremonies, market days, or just lazy afternoons like this one. But they existed, and they meant something. You can feel it in your bones and in the ache of your forearms. As dusk approaches, the courtyard quiets. One final pour is made. This time, from a height that feels impossible over the head, arms locked, a single graceful arc. It lands perfectly, no spill, just a soft sound of foam blooming on ceramic. Everyone claps, not loudly, just enough to honor the moment. You're full of cacao now, physically, spiritually. You lean back on your elbows, let the last of the light settle across your face, and wonder how much froth you'd need to reach the gods. The night is heavy with the smell of firewood and fermented fruit. Crickets drone in the brush, and a cool breeze lifts the sweat from your arms as you make your way to the ceremonial platform. You're not the only one heading that way. Others file in quietly, reverently, gourd cups in hand. No one speaks above a whisper. It's not fear, it's respect. You're about to witness what froth means to a Maya priest. Tonight's ritual is dedicated to a harvest god, one who controls not just corn, but cacao. Because of course, the god of sustenance would also govern the sacred drink that both sustains and awakens. The priest stands at the altar, robed in jaguar skin, wearing a headpiece festooned with feathers that look far too heavy to balance. His face is painted, his gaze unreadable. In one hand, a cacao vessel. In the other, a bunch of fragrant herbs. He raises the gourd. A hush falls over the crowd. Even the cicadas pause, which is frankly more impressive than anything else that happens tonight. The priest pours, slowly, high, with absolute focus. The stream of chocolate arcs through the firelight, catching sparks, and lands in a second vessel with a soft, musical splash. Foam swells instantly, and yes, you feel it. Something in the air shifts, the mood deepens. The drink, suddenly, is more than just plant and water and ritual spice. It's transformed. This is where cacao becomes cosmic. Historians still debate the full symbolic meaning of the foam in these ceremonies. Some believe it represented Yaxha, the first water, primordial and life-giving. Others say it embodied breath or spirit, the bridge between the physical and the divine. Either way, no Maya ritual involving cacao would proceed without it. The gods, allegedly, had standards. Quirky aside, there's a glyph found on some Maya pottery that's thought to represent the sound of froth. Scholars have lovingly nicknamed it CHCHCH, basically the ancient onomatopoeia for foaming chocolate. So yes, even 1,000 to 100 years ago, someone was probably muttering CHCHCH while pouring, like a froth whisperer. You inch closer to the altar. No one stops you. The priest dips a feather into the foamed cacao and flicks it gently toward the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. A symbolic cleansing, a prayer, or maybe an invitation. Then, a sip. He doesn't gulp. He lifts the gourd to his lips and takes just enough to wet his mouth. It's the foam he touches first, always the foam. The drink is shared afterward with other ritual participants, each one bowing slightly, accepting the cup with both hands, eyes cast downward. The drink is sacred. The moment is sacred. Even the vessel matters, decorated with glyphs, stylized jaguars, cacao pods bursting from vines. You're handed a cup. Your hands tremble. Is this safe? Spiritually, you're underqualified for this level of ritual ingestion. But you nod. You raise the vessel. You sip. The foam, warm and a little peppery, breaks on your lips like tiny waves. The liquid beneath is bitter and complex like fire and bark and memory all brewed into one. You feel something, a tightening in your chest, a clarity in your head, or maybe it's just the theobromine kicking in like a cosmic espresso shot. Hard to tell. You lean into the moment. The priest begins to chant, low and deep. You don't understand the words, but you feel them settle in your bones. The rhythm matches your breath, your pulse, the gentle churn of cacao in your stomach. You glance around. Everyone is still, silent, focused. Even the stars above seem to hang lower, as if listening. Cacao, in these rituals, wasn't just for celebration. It was used in rites of passage, birth, death, marriage, war. To welcome a soul into the world, or ease it out. To prepare a warrior for battle, or cleanse a community after drought. Foam wasn't garnish, it was spirit made visible. There's evidence cacao was sometimes mixed with blood during offerings. No, not gallons of it, just a drop enough to signify sacrifice. The cacao stood in as the vessel of life, the blood as its animating force. That doesn't happen tonight, thankfully. You're still easing into your role as honorary froth apprentice. You lean in again, watching as the priest dips his fingers into the foam and marks a symbol on the forehead of a child sitting cross-legged at the altar's edge. The child doesn't flinch, just closes his eyes. A blessing, maybe protection, maybe a promise. Historians still argue whether these markings were literal glyphs or just symbolic smears. Some think they matched astrological patterns, others think they were linked to cacao groves and growing seasons. It's all speculation, of course, that's the fun part. What's not speculative is how seriously cacao was taken as a spiritual medium. It shows up in ancient codices, painted on vases, inscribed on temple walls. Not just being drunk, but poured, offered, frothing. The froth is always there, always rising. One particularly famous vase shows a mythological scene, a god seated on a throne, a servant offering a cacao drink with such a head of foam it practically explodes out of the vessel. You imagine the painter grinning to himself, yes, more bubbles. Make it dramatic. Back in the present, the ceremony begins to wind down. The priest steps back, the cups are empty. The foam, once lofty and alive, now clings to the bottom of bowls like foam after a tide, and yet the magic remains. As people quietly disperse, you're handed a bit of roasted cacao wrapped in a leaf, something to take with you. A token, a reminder. It smells like the ceremony itself, bitter and earthy and layered with meaning. You walk away slowly, heart steady, mind oddly calm. You've seen what froth meant to a priest, not just flavor or texture, but communion. A way to touch something bigger than yourself, through a drink poured high and received with reverence. Back in your little sleeping mat, you lie down under a thatched roof. The stars blink above, soft and indifferent, a breeze rustles the palm leaves. Somewhere, a parrot complains loudly. You smile. That foam. It wasn't just a garnish, it was a message. The morning opens with the hum of voices and the unmistakable rhythm of barter. You're standing in the middle of a Maya market square, and it's more alive than a TikTok dance trend. Children weave between stalls with woven baskets. Vendors shout over one another with the practiced ease of people who've been haggling for centuries, and the air smells like corn, chili, and of course cacao. This isn't your local weekend farmer's market. This is the beating heart of pre-Columbian commerce. And cacao, especially frothy cacao, is the currency, the status symbol, and the social lubricant, all rolled into one bitter, bubbling cup. Your guide points toward a vendor selling drinks out of enormous painted pots. She's got a line, a long one. And every customer gets the same thing, a bowl filled nearly to the brim with foam chocolate. The pouring is fast but practiced. 2 hands, no spillage, maximum bubbles. You wait your turn, soaking in the scene. Next to you, a man is arguing about the price of a pair of sandals, offering 5 cacao beans. The seller counters with 7.5. You quietly wonder how one handles a half-bean situation. Do they bite it, file it down, carry a bean splitter? Because yes, in many Maya and later Aztec markets, cacao wasn't just a food, it was literal money. A form of currency so valuable and stable that people used it to buy tamales, hire workers, and even pay taxes. 1 rabbit, 10 beans, 1 courtesan service. Roughly 100 beans, 1 full turkey. Now you're talking to 100. Inflation was real, but cacao kept things grounded. Quirky footnote: there's some evidence that counterfeit cacao beans existed clay shells painted to look authentic. Historians still argue whether this was widespread forgery or a few desperate con artists trying to buy one last tamale before getting caught. You reach the front of the cacao stall. The vendor sizes you up. Foreigner, foam rookie, probably not ready for the real stuff. But then she smiles and pours you a full serving anyway. It smells like heaven's attic, spiced, smoky, ancient. You lift it to your lips. The foam brushes your face first. Still warm, still lightly bitter, still very much the flavor of this place. A child offers you a handful of tamales wrapped in banana leaves for 5 beans. You dig into your pouch and realize you've got exactly 4. The kid stares at you. You stare back. It's a showdown. Then, without a word, he bites one tamale in half and hands it to you. Deal accepted. You sit on a worn stone bench, sipping your chocolate and chewing your breakfast. The crowd buzzes around you. Pottery clinks, sellers laugh, frogs croak from the market edge like they're running commentary. But what strikes you most is how woven cacao is into everything here. It's not just for priests, not just for warriors or elites. It's for merchants, farmers, potters. There's a stall selling cacao paste pressed into bricks. Another with gourds designed to enhance frothing. A group of teens is using hand-carved sticks to stir a batch into foamy submission, laughing as the drink overflows. You even spot a love charm vendor. His pitch: give your crush a cup of cacao with flauta cacao petals. If they smile, they're yours. Seems legit, but not all cacao was equal. Some beans were considered higher quality than others, larger, shinier, darker. Some were reserved for nobility. Some blends included rare spices or secret ingredients. There's evidence that elite households had personal recipes, guarded closely, passed down like grandma's secret chili. One vendor invites you behind his stall to show off his collection of drinking vessels. They're stunning, polished, painted, each with glyphs around the rim. He lets you hold one. It's heavier than you expect. The inside is smooth from years of use. You can almost feel the ghosts of past drinks, ceremonial and casual, offered and accepted, bitter and sweet. He points to one with an especially tall rim and a narrow base. That's a foamer, he says, designed to collect and hold a towering head of bubbles. Pour too low, and you lose the effect. Pour just right, and the foam dances in the bowl like whipped clouds. Historians still argue about how regional cacao recipes varied. Did lowland Maya communities favor spicier blends, while Highlanders leaned toward fruit infusions? Or were the differences more about social class than geography? Some excavated vessels still contain traces of chili, vanilla, and even flowers. Others are more subtle, their ingredients lost to time. You help pour a few cups at the stall. It's an awkward dance of height, tilt, and wrist finesse. The vendor gives you a polite smile when your phone collapses instantly. He takes the bowl, pours it again himself, and like magic the bubbles appear. You nod, humbled. Later in the day, the market hosts a frothing contest. Of course it does. Competitors line up in front of a raised platform, each with their signature vessel and mixture. One uses a reed straw for stirring. Another uses the high pour technique from earlier. A third uses what looks suspiciously like a whisk made of carved deer bone. You're roped in, not as a contestant, as a judge. Because clearly your opinion matters now. You're given a tasting gourd. Each drink is unique. One's spicy enough to make your eyes water. Another is smoother, almost floral. One is thick with cornmeal, more food than drink. But the foam, that's the prize. The winning cup has a head of foam, so dense you could almost rest a chili on top. You announce the victor, and the crowd erupts. The winner is crowned with a garland of cacao leaves. His prize, a full turkey, and bragging rights for a year. You wander the market as the sun begins to dip. Traders pack their goods, children chase dogs, and the vendors start passing around leftover chocolate. It's quieter now, softer. You sip one last bowl of frothy cacao before heading back to your mat. This one simple just paste, water, a bit of chili, no frills, but the foam. It rises slowly, almost shyly, then settles into a soft dome. You drink, smile, and think about how, in this world, wealth, flavor, and status were all contained in one tiny, bitter bean. The morning breaks bright and sharp, like obsidian sliced through sky. You've barely wiped the sleep from your eyes when a trumpet-like conch shell blasts across the village. Your host grins and slaps your shoulder with a little too much enthusiasm. "It's warrior training day," he says. "Oh, wonderful." You're led to an open field where a group of young men are stretching, chanting, and downing bowls of a reddish, bubbling drink. You've seen cacao before, dark brown, earthy, bitter, but this version is something else entirely. It's blood red, thick, and steaming. One sip and you understand instantly. This is a war drink. This is Aztec territory now. Technically, you're still in Mesoamerica, but the cultural scenery has shifted. You've moved forward in time and slightly westward into the heart of the Mexica Empire, where cacao didn't just mean ritual and money, it meant fuel. And the Aztecs, they weaponized it. The warriors drink before training, before ceremony, before battle. It's cacao mixed with chili, maize flour, and sometimes blood, or at least blood-colored spices like achiote. The foam is dense and clings to their lips like war paint. You're handed a bowl. It's still warm from being poured high. You sip. The foam is thick, but the heat of the chili punches you in the sinuses like a polite but assertive slap. You sputter. Someone laughs. A young warrior pounds his chest, then knocks back the rest of his bowl like it's a protein shake. Historians still argue whether this warrior's blend was strictly ceremonial or if it had practical effects. But between the caffeine, theobromine, chili, and carbs from cornmeal, the drink packed a potent combo of stimulation, heat, and sustained energy. Think of it as the original pre-workout. One Spanish chronicler noted that Montezuma, the famed emperor, reportedly drank as many as 50 cups of cacao a day, most of them thick, spiced, and frothy. He claimed it helped with stamina. That's all we're saying. Your guide leads you to a shaded area where other warriors in training are preparing their drinks. The process is similar to what you've seen before: grinding on a metate, mixing with water, but with more heat. Literally, the chili is abundant. One young man adds crushed corn, another drops in a few roasted seeds. They stir with long wooden spoons or shake the drink vigorously between vessels. And there's the foam again, red this time. Frothy and slightly oily, bubbling like a hot spring. You wonder if the color was symbolic, meant to resemble blood, or fire, or both. You wouldn't be surprised. The Aztecs loved a good metaphor, and a good war. A priest arrives, wearing turquoise beads and a robe lined with feathers. He anoints the warriors with foam, literally dips his fingers into a bowl and smears it across their foreheads. A blessing, a protection spell, or maybe just sunscreen made of chocolate. We don't judge. Quirky fact: Aztec warriors carried cacao beans with them as rations and offerings. The beans were both food and bribe. Lose a skirmish. Might as well try to pay off the captors with a handful of top-tier nibs. You're asked to try a full training circuit. You regret it immediately. After your second lap around the courtyard, your lungs are on fire and your calves are singing protest songs. A child offers you another bowl of the warrior blend. You down it, and yes, you feel something change. Your muscles wake up, your brain sharpens, or maybe the chili just burned a hole through your soul. You're guided toward a mural painted on the courtyard wall. It shows warriors preparing for battle, each one depicted with a steaming gourd in hand. Above them, stylized foam, bubbles rising like smoke. That's how important it was, not just the drink, but the foam specifically. The froth was part of the warrior's arsenal. Historians still puzzle over the exact role cacao played in Aztec military life. Was it daily sustenance, ritual only, a morale booster? What's clear is that soldiers, nobles, and even merchants carried it with pride. In some cases, it was used to seal alliances, bribe enemies, or reward valor, and always it was served foamy. Later that afternoon, you're taken to a private chamber in the palace complex. A nobleman greets you. He sits cross-legged on a jaguar pelt, sipping from a golden cacao cup as a servant refills it with a flourish. The foam, a perfect spiral, thick and creamy. You are not offered a seat, just a bowl. You accept. It tastes different, richer, more floral, possibly vanilla, possibly rose. This is elite stuff. The nobleman nods at you slowly. You nod back, unsure what the exchange means, but hoping it doesn't involve bloodletting. Quirky tidbit: some elite Aztec recipes called for mushrooms or fermented sap in their cacao. Hallucinogenic hot chocolate, essentially. Not on today's menu, but it definitely existed. Imagine taking a spiritual journey via foam and fungi. Sounds like a Thursday night in Tenochtitlan. As the sun sets, you're invited to a warrior's feast. Everyone's shirtless. Everyone's glowing. Everyone's foamed up. The food is spicy, earthy, grounded in maize and meat. But the drink, always the drink, is the centerpiece. A servant pours from high above the fire, creating an arc that glows in the flames. It lands with a hiss and a froth. The sound alone could put you in a trance. You sip, savor, and finally understand. For the Aztecs, chocolate wasn't comfort food, it was power, fire in liquid form. Whether in the temple or on the battlefield, it animated the body, sharpened the mind, and whispered promises of glory. You lie down on a mat of woven palm fronds, full of chili, foam, and possibly a touch of adrenaline. Stars blink open above you like curious eyes. Somewhere, a jaguar yowls. Your heartbeat matches the rhythm of the drums in the courtyard. Your breath carries the faint scent of roasted cacao. And in the stillness of night, you wonder, could froth win a war? You wake to the gentle clack of wood against clay. It's rhythmic, hypnotic, like a low-key metronome for dreams. As you lift your head and peek over the edge of your sleeping mat, you spot the source, an older woman standing by the hearth, spinning a carved wooden stick between her palms. The motion is effortless, like she's done it 1,000 times, and she has. This is your first lesson in the art of molinillo frothing, the most charming invention in the chocolate world, and possibly the most fun you can have with a kitchen utensil that isn't an air fryer. She hands you one. It's made of wood, smooth from years of use, with circular ridges that catch light like rings in water. You clutch it like a lightsaber, which gets a tired smile from your teacher. In front of you is a clay vessel full of warm cacao already ground, mixed with water and spices, and lightly foamed from pouring. But now comes the performance. You insert the molinillo, cup your hands together, and start spinning it between your palms. The tip whirls, and the liquid below starts to dance. At first, it just swirls lazily, then tiny bubbles begin to bloom. A soft, satiny froth lifts upward like it's taking a breath. This tool isn't just clever, it's iconic. Though best known from colonial and post-colonial times, the molinillo may trace its design back much further, evolving from earlier stirring sticks used by Mesoamerican women. Historians still argue whether the molinillo itself existed before the Spanish arrived, or if it was developed later, based on native frothing techniques and European culinary aesthetics. Either way, it stuck, and it spun. The beauty of it. It turns the everyday act of mixing into a meditative swirl. It sings softly against the ceramic bowl, and before you know it, you've lost 10 minutes to tiny, fizzy bubbles. Not bad for a pre-coffee morning ritual. You try it again, faster this time. Foam builds like a cloud in a teacup. Your teacher nods. You're not great, but you're no longer embarrassing either. Quirky fact, in some communities, molinillos are still given as wedding gifts, often carved with hearts, birds, or even the couple's names. The implication, a good marriage needs daily stirring of chocolate and feelings. You take a break and wander through the kitchen. It's dim but warm. Firelight flickers over earthen walls. The room smells of corn, wood smoke, and cacao, combination that should really be its own scented candle. A second woman, younger, is preparing fresh chocolate paste by hand. She grinds cacao nibs on a metate, mixing in chili, vanilla, and honey. The paste is thick, almost clay-like. She offers you a taste on the tip of a wooden spoon. It's complex, bitter, sweet, earthy, and electric. You suddenly understand how this mixture managed to hold empires in its grip. Beside her, rows of clay jugs are arranged on low shelves. Some contain different chocolate pastes. Others hold flavored infusions, flowers, herbs, even citrus peels. Chocolate here isn't a one-recipe-fits-all affair. It's customizable, personal, almost intimate. Then comes the double pour technique. In this kitchen, molinillos are used for ceremonial blends, but for everyday cacao, the preferred method is pouring from vessel to vessel. The key is altitude, one bowl held high, the other low, and the stream cascading in a long arc. It looks risky, but with enough practice, it creates a rich, consistent foam. You try, you fail, you mop. The women laugh gently, not unkindly, and one helps you try again. This time, it works better. Foam, real, living, honest-to-goodness froth. You feel like you just passed an ancient final exam. In the corner, a small gourd is carved with glyphs, evidence of personal ownership, perhaps, or maybe a dedication. Some researchers believe these vessels were as prized as the drink itself. Personalized cacao bowls were sometimes buried with the dead or passed down through generations. They weren't just cups, they were heirlooms. You sit down for a mid-morning cacao break. The drink is thick, almost chewy, spiced with cinnamon and sweetened with honey. It's served in a deep cup, and the molinillo is placed beside it like a spoon at a fancy café. You stir gently, foam rises, comfort deepens. Across the room, a teenage boy is trying to show off by spinning the molinillo one-handed. It slips and hits him square in the forehead. Everyone applauds. You ask your host how many times a day they drink cacao. She shrugs, 2, maybe 3. More if it's a holiday or market day, less if they're out of beans. But always with foam, she adds, never flat. Flat chocolate is sadness. You sip yours again and nod. She's right. There's a small shrine in the back corner of the kitchen, a gourd bowl resting beside a carved figure. The statue represents a cacao deity, possibly Cacao, the Maya and Aztec god associated with cacao, trade, and war. A few beans lie at the figure's feet, along with a splash of fresh foam, an offering. Historians still debate whether foam itself held spiritual meaning, or if it was simply a sign of well-made chocolate. Some argue the rising bubbles symbolized life, breath, or even the connection between worlds. Others say it was just delicious. Either way, it was never skipped. As the afternoon wanes, your hands are sticky from spilled cacao and your arm sore from molinillo spinning. But your spirit is calm, your belly warm, and your brain pleasantly fizzing from the drink's mild stimulants. One last spin. One last pour. You get it just right. The foam lifts like meringue. Your host claps, and you feel absurdly proud. You sit on the threshold of the kitchen, legs stretched out, watching the shadows shift across the ground. Somewhere in the trees, a bird calls in short bursts, like a flute warming up. A breeze carries the scent of roasting beans. And you, holding a gourd full of perfectly frothed chocolate, feel like you've just passed into a quieter, richer timeline, one where caffeine comes with ceremony, and every cup starts with a gentle, wooden spin. You're curled up in the corner of a low adobe house now, watching smoke drift upward in lazy swirls from a fire pit. The air smells like earth and roasted cacao, with a hint of sweet maize. A clay pot simmers quietly on the hearth, and a woman older, steady-handed, dressed in a hoophill stitched with crimson thread leans over it, whispering to herself. She's making chocolate again, but this time, it's different. This isn't for warriors or markets or ceremonies. This is kitchen froth, domestic foam, the kind that never makes it into colonial manuscripts or conquest reports. This is the work of women, mothers, daughters, sisters passing down the secrets of cacao, cup by steaming cup. She catches your gaze and gestures for you to sit closer. You obey, tucking your legs beneath you as the floor warms your thighs. The walls of the kitchen are darkened with years of smoke, but there's comfort in the enclosure, like sitting in the belly of a story. She dips a ladle into the pot and pours from a height that nearly defies physics. The thick liquid lands with a satisfying plop in a wide, painted bowl. You watch as the foam blooms across the surface, like clouds stretching into dawn. And then she begins to chant, not loudly, not theatrically. Just a soft, rhythmic recitation, something between a recipe and a spell. You don't understand the words, but the tone carries intent, maybe gratitude, maybe invocation. The cacao, it seems, deserves reverence even here, in a quiet family home. Historians still argue whether these domestic rituals had official religious meaning or were simply part of the cultural fabric, a little sacred embedded in the everyday. Either way, the care is unmistakable. This is chocolate made with precision and patience, and yes, love. She hands you a bowl. The foam is creamy, tan, slightly speckled with cinnamon. You lift it to your lips and taste warmth, comfort, depth. It's not the same firecracker brew from the battlefield or the elite, perfumed blends of the nobility. This is a chocolate that nourishes, that hugs from the inside. And you realize, the froth was always the goal, but the context shaped the taste. Across the room, a younger woman, her daughter, grinds fresh cacao on a metate, hips swaying gently to the rhythm. Her skirt brushes the floor in soft waves. Her hands are stained dark from the oils, but she doesn't flinch from the work. She hums, a tune older than bread. You watch as she kneads in toasted maize flour, vanilla, and just a touch of chili. The resulting paste is pressed into small discs and set aside. These will be dried, stored, maybe even traded later on. But for now, they're the base for family cacao, an edible archive. Quirky fact, in some parts of Mesoamerica, women would chew cacao nibs before spitting them into water to help emulsify the drink and encourage frothing. It wasn't just practical, it was believed that the human element added spiritual power. Chocolate, quite literally, made by mouth. You're offered another cup. This one is different again, sweeter, flavored with flata cacao and a hint of honey. It's cooler now, more like a thick milkshake than a hot drink. Foam still clings to the edges, stubborn and silky. You sip and feel your shoulders drop another inch. Is this what the end of whirring tastes like? You glance around the room. Children play in one corner, occasionally sneaking sips from their mother's bowl. An elder woman tends to a batch of tamales. And there, in the middle of it all, is cacao quietly anchoring the day, a drink, a food, a thread. The molinillo is here, of course resting on a woven cloth beside the hearth. Its wood is darker from years of use, the ridges worn smooth. This tool doesn't just froth, it connects. Generations of women have held that handle, spun that shaft, made bubbles for breakfast and bedtime. It might be the most well-loved artifact in the house. You ask about the designs carved into its surface. Spirals, birds, flowers. The woman smiles and traces one with her finger. This is my mother, she says. This is the moon. This one, she taps the center. This is foam. You sit with that for a moment. Foam as a symbol, foam as legacy, not just a texture, but a story told in air and oil. Historians often credit men with the cacao economy, priests, warriors, rulers. But here, in this kitchen, you see who really sustained the chocolate legacy. Women didn't just prepare it, they preserved it, adapted it, passed it on. And while ceremonial froth might be lofty and market foam transactional, kitchen froth is different. It's emotional, a sign that someone took time. That someone stirred for you. Another quirky tidbit? In some villages, froth was used to divine the future. The bubbles that rose first, left, or right could signal luck, pregnancy, or an impending visitor. Chocolate as oracle. You smile. Why not? As dusk slips in through the thatch and the crickets start tuning up, you find yourself helping. You hold the bowl. You pour from a little higher. You spin the molinillo, and the bubbles dance. Your foam isn't perfect, but it earns a nod from your teacher. The women laugh as they pass cups around. There's a rhythm to the whole affair, a choreography of cups and clinks and giggles. It feels timeless, outside of calendars and wars. Just people and chocolate, and the soft, steady hush of stories being poured. You realize you've stopped checking for meaning in every bubble. You've started just a drinking. And that might be the greatest wisdom of all. The last light fades. Bowls are rinsed, coals raked, children collected from corners. One last cup remains yours. The foam is thin now, but holding. You lift it, savor it, sip it down. Outside, stars rise. Inside, the kitchen exhales. And somewhere in your chest, you carry the secret. The best chocolate is the one made slowly, with hands that remember, and a little froth that rises like magic, just before sleep. Your dreams get strange, bubbly, even. You're floating in a gourd, drifting down a chocolate river, the surface lightly foamed, smelling faintly of smoke and vanilla. Somewhere a frog is singing in Nahuatl. And just when it starts to make sense, you wake up to the smell of something fermenting, not in a bad way. More like sourdough starter meets wine cellar meets chocolate. You sit up and stretch, your back cracking like old pottery. Outside, dawn peeks through mist and trees. Inside, your nose twitches toward that wild, yeasty scent again. You follow it through a narrow alley and into what looks like an outdoor shed, walls made of cane and palm fronds. At the center, resting in a wide clay basin, is a dark, bubbling liquid. You peer closer. Is it cacao? Yes, but this is different. The foam isn't silky and structured, it's chaotic, frothy in a way that suggests wild chemistry. You half expected to start humming. A young man notices your fascination and waves you in. He explains, slowly, patiently, that what you're smelling is fermented cacao drink, something between a beer, a wine, and a smoothie with a secret. And yes, it foams, but this time, not from a mulli-nillo or a dramatic pour. It foams because it's alive. This brew goes by different names across regions and centuries: chicha de cacao, chocolatl, or simply cacao agrio. Unlike the finely ground ceremonial drink, this one starts with raw or sun-dried cacao pulp, sometimes mixed with maize or fruits, then left to ferment naturally in warm containers. After a few days, the sugars from the cacao's sticky white pulp start breaking down. Yeast gets involved, and voila, an ancient buzz. Historians still argue whether fermented cacao was consumed for intoxication, for ritual, or simply as a byproduct of preservation. What's clear is that this was an entirely different chocolate world, messier, funkier, and probably more fun at weddings. The man ladles you a cup. The foam quivers on top like it's not sure it belongs there. You take a cautious sip. It's tart, it's funky, it's delicious. There's a sharp tang like kefir or kombucha, with a chocolatey earthiness that wraps around your tongue and settles deep in your throat. It's not sweet, it's not smooth, but it's compelling. You go in for another sip before you've even swallowed the first. He grins. Quirky fact. Some Mesoamerican communities used fermented cacao drinks as offerings to the gods of rain or fertility, pouring the foamy concoction into ceremonial trenches or over planted seeds. The belief that the bubbling drink would invite divine energy into the soil. Imagine watering your garden with chocolate beer and calling it religion. In the background, others are working. A woman is mashing fermented pulp with a heavy wooden paddle, adding chili and roasted plantain. Another is skimming foam into a gourd, which she sets aside like it's gold. You ask why they care about the foam in a fermented drink. Surely, the bubbles are just a byproduct. She shrugs and says, foam means it's breathing. You file that away. Might apply to people, too. As the brew continues to bubble, he explains that this drink has been passed down in oral tradition far more than written records. Colonial scribes were less interested in peasant brews and more obsessed with the elite chocolate ceremonies. But this fermented cousin, often served in gourds and shared communally, predates conquest and outlived empire. You wonder if the priests knew what they were missing. In one corner of the shed, a gourd hangs upside down on a string, dripping slow foam into a vessel below. It looks like an hourglass time measured in froth. The man chuckles and tells you that some people used to predict the strength of the brew by how long the foam held after pouring. A short-lived fizz meant weak drink, a resilient head meant, well, don't drink it before noon. He invites you to help stir the vat, and you lean in with a wooden pole, moving in slow, figure-8 motions. The surface glugs and swirls, releasing soft burps of foam. There's something oddly satisfying about it, like you're stirring a secret. Later, he shows you a set of small, painted vessels used specifically for this kind of brew. Unlike the ceremonial cacao cups, these are narrower and more utilitarian but no less loved. Some are carved with birds, others with simple zigzag lines. A few even feature little froth peaks painted on the side, like a visual toast to the drink's best feature. Historians have found similar vessels in burial sites and rural ruins, often overlooked because they weren't flashy or elite. But you get the feeling these everyday items held deep meaning. Foam, in this world, wasn't just pretty, it was evidence of life. And here is a strange theory. Some scholars believe fermented cacao may have been consumed in early ballgame rituals, used to both energize and spiritually cleanse players before they entered the court. Others argue it was simply the Mesoamerican equivalent of Friday night drinks with friends. Either way, there's no denying the importance of the froth, even here. Every version of cacao across the centuries seems to chase those bubbles, whether poured, spun, or naturally brewed. You finish your cup and feel a low warmth settle in your belly. Not tipsy, exactly, but softened, like your muscles have slipped into hammocks. They offer you another round, this time with roasted maize added for texture. The foam builds taller now, richer, slightly more stable. You sip and feel like you're drinking a storm cloud. As the morning heats up, the group gathers under a tree and passes around bowls, laughing quietly, the way people do when their mouths are too full of memory to speak. The drink has a pull not quite addictive, but magnetic. It draws you into its pace, slows your heartbeat, makes the sunlight shimmer slightly. You glance at the foam again, now curling at the rim of your bowl like foam at low tide. It's not precise, not elegant, but it's alive. And maybe that's the whole point. You've just about adjusted to the earthy sparkle of fermented chocolate when you hear a strange sound in the distance: hooves, metal, barked orders in a language that doesn't belong here. You turn, a procession of men approaches, faces shadowed by wide-brimmed helmets, their horses anxious, snorting at the scent of jungle. Steel clinks, boots trample maize fields. And just like that, the world changes. Welcome to the 16th century. Spain has arrived. You find yourself pulled into a swirl of tension, curiosity, and total misunderstanding. The conquistadors, sunburnt, hungry, and really just looking for gold, have stumbled into something they can't begin to comprehend: a land where chocolate is sacred, frothy, and absolutely not sweet. They take a sip, they gag. They try not to look insulted, but they are. And who could blame them? They were expecting dessert. Instead, they got a dark, gritty, chili-laced brew that tastes like roasted regret. You stifle a chuckle, but of course, they don't give up on the stuff. No, they do what conquerors always do: rebrand it. This is the era of colonial confusion, where European tastes slam headfirst into centuries of Mesoamerican ritual. The Spanish begin experimenting, watering the drink down, removing the chili, heating it, sweetening it, and eventually erasing the froth entirely. Sacrilege, but they don't know that. Historians still argue whether the first Europeans truly understood the ceremonial importance of the froth, or whether they just thought the foam was some quirky local garnish. Either way, it disappears almost immediately from their versions. You sit at a long wooden table, where Spanish friars are scribbling notes while sipping their modified chocolate drinks, this time served warm and in mugs, not gourds. They're adding sugar from Caribbean plantations, cinnamon from Sri Lanka, sometimes even cow's milk. It's a recipe morphing in real time, and you can feel the soul of the drink fading. They talk about evangelizing the natives, about replacing rituals with scripture. One friar mutters something about pagan bubbles. You want to throw a molinillo at him. Quirky fact: early Spanish missionaries were so suspicious of the way indigenous people revered chocolate that they debated whether drinking it during fasting broke the rules of Lent. One bishop was allegedly poisoned with a spiced chocolate drink brought to him by his servants. It's unclear if the chocolate did it or just carried the grudge. You sneak away, deeper into the kitchens of a colonial estate, where indigenous cooks are still making cacao the old way when the overseers aren't watching. You hear the telltale whoosh of a height pour. You spot a molinillo hidden behind a stack of tortillas. The froth survives in shadows now, whipped in silence. It's here you meet a young woman named Itzel, who works in the kitchen under Spanish rule. She whispers as she stirs. They think chocolate is theirs now, she says. But they don't even know how to make it speak. She pours a ladleful from high above, her arm practiced. The foam rises, thick and golden. She doesn't smile. This isn't a game. It's resistance, every bubble a quiet rebellion. You help her grind more cacao, this time with almonds the Spanish brought from Europe. It changes the texture, makes the foam softer, but less resilient. The old metate stone still bears scratches from 100 ceremonies past, but its new life is one of quiet adaptation. She adds achiote for color, maybe even symbolism, and offers you a taste. It's good, it's different, but the tension simmers just beneath the surface. In town, chocolate is now being sold in shops pressed into hardened tablets, infused with exotic spices, and wrapped for travel back to Spain. Foam is notably absent, too messy, too indigenous, too alive. Still, the colonists drink it constantly. In monasteries, nunneries, palaces, and parliaments, chocolate becomes both obsession and status symbol. The bitter potion once whispered to gods now graces gilded porcelain cups on silver trays. One scholar later jokes, the Spanish didn't conquer the Aztecs, they just wanted their cocoa. Of course, there are efforts to refine the froth. European attempts to engineer it. Some use spinning spoons, others try heating techniques, but none of them replicate that velvety, high-rise foam born of ancient hands and gravity's kiss. You visit a print shop where an artist is carving a woodblock image of a woman pouring from a gourd. She's captured mid-pour, the liquid frozen in time. Foam spills upward like smoke. The caption calls her barbarous, but you see grace in the arc. She's a master. The print, ironically, helps preserve the memory of what the colonists tried to suppress. Another quirky tidbit: some colonial elites eventually became so addicted to chocolate that they demanded it be brought to them during Mass, sneaking sips behind pews and altar curtains. The church tried to ban the practice, but even bishops had sweet teeth. Go figure. You travel briefly to Spain teleporting, dreamlike to a chilly stone kitchen in Seville. A noble woman sits beside a roaring fire, sipping hot chocolate from a delicate handleless cup. It's thick, sweet, velvet brown, served with churros. But there's no froth, no pour, no dance. She sighs contentedly, utterly unaware of what's missing. You return to the Americas, heart aching just a little. Colonization didn't erase cacao, but it flattened it. It made it palatable, predictable. And foam, the airy soul of the drink, was one of the first things sacrificed. But you still feel it pulsing underground in kitchens like Itzel's, in secret night markets, in quiet sips passed between knowing hands, and you realize something. The froth never died, it just went underground. You're sitting in a shaded courtyard now, the kind with ivy-covered columns and soft fountains murmuring secrets. A delicate porcelain cup warms your hands. You raise it to your lips and wait. Is that sugar? Oh yes, the colonists have done it. They've sweetened the sacred. The first sip catches you off guard. It's cloying, familiar. The bitterness of roasted cacao is buried beneath a mountain of sweetness. This is not the cacao that whispered prayers. This is cacao wearing a powdered wig. You glance across the table at a group of elegantly dressed ladies, all fluttering fans and gossip. They're raving about chocolate, its richness, its warmth, its indulgence. To them, it's fashion, pleasure, a new world luxury dressed in cinnamon and vanilla. And they're hooked. Quirky fact. By the late 17th century, chocolate becomes so popular among Spanish aristocrats that some women carry custom chocolate serving sets in their handbags. Think of them as the early prototype of the travel espresso kit. You know, for emergencies, but there's tension here. You can feel it in the stiffness of the friar's robes, in the way their eyes narrow at every sip. You re-witnessing the dawn of a theological debate as old as the cookie aisle. Can something this delicious be sinful? Some clergy say yes, that it encourages gluttony, that it's rooted in paganism, that the way women sip it seductively from cups painted with naked cherubs is clearly an invitation to ruin. Others argue the opposite, that chocolate, especially when consumed without sugar, which, let's be honest, almost no one is doing anymore, is a healthful tonic. A drink for the weary, a balm for the soul. After all, how could something so revered by indigenous people not be part of God's creation? Historians still argue whether chocolate's shift from sacred to sweet was more a result of colonial taste, capitalist expansion, or just plain human craving. Most likely, a bit of all three. You travel next to a French salon, the walls gold-trimmed and crowded with wigs and perfumes. The drink is now steaming hot, frothed with early mechanical whisks, and served with sugar cubes so perfectly formed you wonder if anyone eats them, or just admires the geometry. Foam is optional here, nice, but not essential. A man quotes Voltaire between sips, another compares chocolate to poetry. A third launches into a political rant, only to be hushed when someone spills a drop on the velvet settee. You shake your head, the Maya would weep, and yet, you admit it's not all bad. There's something intriguing about this European chocolate, something cozy. It's no longer a drink of gods and sacrifice, it's a domestic pleasure now. A bedtime treat, a reason to pause and chat. In Italy, monks are using chocolate to stay awake during long prayer sessions. In England, newfangled chocolate houses pop up sort of like modern coffee shops, but rowdier. You sit in one, surrounded by smoke, cards slapping on wood, and mugs of hot chocolate spiked with rum and scandal. Quirky fact, one London chocolate house in the 1700s required a password for entry and hosted political conspiracies over mugs of cocoa. Picture a secret club where everyone's wired on sugar and cocoa butter. Back in Spain, sugar production ramps up thanks, tragically, to enslaved labor on Caribbean plantations. You sip your drink and feel the shadow of that truth wrap itself around your tongue. The chocolate tastes sweeter, but the cost is immense. A quick detour. You visit a convent kitchen in Puebla, Mexico. Here, nuns are innovating. They've started mixing chocolate with spices, sugar, and ground nuts to create something new mole. It's rich, dark, complex, and used to coat chicken instead of fill cups. They also invent drinking chocolate recipes with floral notes, like rose or jasmine. One nun even writes her recipes in code, afraid someone will steal them. You watch as she carefully stirs a pot of bubbling cocoa, the room thick with nutmeg and mystery. She looks up and says, "God made chocolate bitter, so we'd know what to do with it." Back in the market, chocolate is now sold as solid blocks wrapped and ready for melting. Foam is almost entirely gone. There's no need to pour from a height when you can just dunk a tablet in warm milk and stir. But among indigenous families, the old methods linger. You find a home on the outskirts of town where a grandmother is still grinding cacao by hand, pouring from gourd to bowl, coaxing the froth to rise. She doesn't call it resistance. She calls it breakfast. You help her prep the metate. The cacao is freshly roasted, still warm in your fingers. You kneel beside her, arms already tired before the first pass. She smiles without pity. "Foam takes patience," she says. Later, you sit under the fig tree, sipping her creation. The froth is humble, barely a finger high, but it's there. And more importantly, it was earned. Across the Atlantic, froth has become optional, decorative. In some cases, a foam stencil on top of whipped cream. But here, it's still an act of care. A memory held aloft. You return to the city one last time. At a colonial bakery, you watch workers mix chocolate with sugar to make the first bonbons, tiny edible jewels, stuffed with liqueurs, dusted with powdered dreams. Chocolate is now chewable, marketable, packaged. Foam doesn't fit in a wrapper. You walk out, a little dazed. So much change, so much sweetness, but beneath the layers of sugar. And invention, you remember Itzel's quiet pour. The priest's paranoia, the nun's coded recipes. And you wonder, did sweetness save chocolate, or just silence it? You're back in the present day now, or something like it. Your surroundings shift into sterile white, chrome countertops, bright lab lights. The scent of ethanol wipes and toasted cacao. Welcome to the science lab, where centuries of chocolate-making tradition are being dissected under microscopes and remade in beakers. Here, froth isn't sacred, it's data. A food scientist in a crisp lab coat smiles politely as you wander in, clearly out of place with your lingering whiff of molinillo shaken foam on your sleeves. She's measuring bubble density in a sample of reconstituted cacao paste, trying to determine the optimal height to pour ratio for traditional Mesoamerican froth. You blink. This is happening. Historians still argue whether modern science can truly recreate the rich, aromatic froth of the Maya and Aztecs. We have the tools: 3D modeling, high-speed cameras, even AI simulations, but what we lack is intuition, instinct, the ancestral hands behind the motion. Quirky fact: a recent university experiment involved building a robot arm to mimic the gourd pouring technique. It calculated angles, height, and pour velocity down to the millimeter. The result? Foam, but soulless foam. No subtle flavor, no spiritual lift. Just a technically perfect column of microbubbles. You step into the culinary sciences wing, where chefs in lab gear are remixing recipes from ancient codices. They're working with wild cacao varietals, chilies, maize, and yes-spit fermentation techniques. The team leads you to a taste station. Tiny ceramic bowls labeled a through F. One of them has a molinillo. One is poured from height. One was whipped with a mechanical frother. You taste them all. One catches you off guard: a tangy, bitter, foam-laced brew with a citrusy kick. They tell you it was made from a 2,000-year-old seed line rediscovered in Chiapas. Your tongue tingles. Then comes the star attraction. A lab technician brings out a molinillo hand-carved, decades old, passed down from a family in Oaxaca. The scientist holds it reverently, like a relic, and begins spinning it rapidly in a wide clay bowl of prepared chocolate. You recognize the sound instantly, that rhythmic slap-splash-slap of froth taking shape. You lean closer. The bubbles rise. This isn't replication. It's resurrection. You watch as she sets it down. "This," she says, "is the only method we've found that feels right." You nod. Of course it is. Then someone from the chemistry team steps in with charts showing bubble lifespans, protein structures, surface tension models. All very impressive, but you can't help thinking the Maya didn't need graphs. They had stories, ritual, rhythm. Still, the researchers press on. One anthropologist is building an open-source chocolate froth database where scholars can compare historic descriptions of foam texture. Another team is analyzing murals, ceramics, and colonial documents for height-to-pour ratios. One image even suggests that some elite women used specially shaped gourds to amplify oration. There's also growing interest in foam as language. Could the way froth behaved, its texture, duration, shape have conveyed meaning in certain ceremonies? Historians and linguists are collaborating, trying to match symbolic motifs in art with physical froth formations. Is it a stretch? Maybe, but it's the kind of beautiful, obsessive stretch you can't help but admire. You leave the lab and visit a university kitchen where culinary students are learning to make chocolate the old way, and by old, they mean ancient. You spot a matate station, a calabash for pouring. A student with dreadlocked hair is trying to master the height pour. He's on his 6th try. Foam is minimal. You ever get it right? You ask. He grins. Once, I think. 4, like, 3 seconds. Still, he keeps trying. That's the whole point. Quirky fact. Some schools now offer special workshops on indigenous chocolate making, complete with frothing technique tutorials, cacao origin stories, and a lecture on the ethics of cultural appropriation. It's awkward, thoughtful, and kind of beautiful. You meet an elder visiting from Guatemala. She's teaching the class how to sing to the chocolate while stirring something her grandmother taught her. No one's quite sure what the words mean. It doesn't matter. She spins the molinillo slowly, softly chanting. The students go quiet. And the foam rises tall and golden and effortless. You taste it. Somehow, it's better than anything from the lab. Later, you visit a high-end chocolate boutique in a big city. Spotlights, velvet boxes, truffle samplers, their claim to fame. A Maya-inspired ceremonial drinking chocolate frothed tableside with a molinillo engraved with faux glyphs. You watch as the server pours from a designer gourd. The foam is beautiful, but something about it feels too performative, like a reenactment with a souvenir at the end. You sip the drink. It's good, rich, spicy, but you don't feel the same shiver you got from the elder's bowl. Historians still argue whether this kind of modern frothing elevated, curated, sanitized is homage or co-option. Maybe it's both. Maybe froth, like culture, can't be frozen in amber. It has to shift, ferment, and rise anew. You end your day in a quiet kitchen. No cameras, no lab coats. Just you, a bowl of ground cacao, and a wooden molinillo you found in a dusty shop. You heat water gently, add a pinch of chili. Stir slowly, you begin to spin. The sound returns slap splash slap, growing steady. The foam builds, just a little. You lift your bowl and pour from above, trying not to flinch. A few bubbles drift upward. Not perfect, but enough to remember. You're standing in the middle of a heated argument, but don't worry, it's the scholarly kind. Thick glasses, louder than necessary voices, and far too many PowerPoint slides. Welcome to the Great Froth Debate. The topic: what was the true method of frothing pre-Columbian chocolate? On your left, Team Molinillo, proud defenders of the spinning stick method. They claim that the molinillo, introduced during early colonial times, was an evolution of indigenous stirring practices and quickly became the preferred frothing technique. Their evidence includes 17th century paintings, Spanish kitchen inventories, and a collection of ornately carved sticks that could double as percussion instruments. On your right, Team Pour from Height, arguing passionately that the original and most authentic method was the ceremonial gourd pour, lifting one vessel high above the head and letting the chocolate cascade into another, like a waterfall of brown silk. They point to classic Maya murals, showing elite women and servants in mid-pour, the liquid arching dramatically. In the corner, a few rogue scholars muttering about spit fermentation and how foam might have been enhanced by using saliva as a catalyst in some ceremonies. You edge away slowly, clutching your sanitized travel mug. Historians still argue whether the molinillo replaced or simply refined ancient techniques. Some say it democratized froth, bringing it into kitchens where height pouring wasn't practical. Others claim it diluted the ritual power of the original method, reducing sacred choreography to a whirling kitchen trick. One quirky argument you overhear: a few researchers are testing whether the shape of the gourd round versus oblong affects oration during the pour. Turns out, it does. Some gourds were likely chosen specifically for their foaming potential. Think of them as the barista-approved vessels of their time. You take a front row seat in a museum lecture hall. The speaker, An archaeobotanist with frizzy hair and a passion for microresidue presents findings from a Maya burial site, traces of cacao on a spouted vessel with no evidence of stirring sticks. Pour from height, probably, but then someone in the back raises a hand. Couldn't it also be shaken like a cocktail? Silence, then murmurs, a few people nod, one takes notes. Suddenly, a new theory is born, the shake hypothesis. You lean over to a grad student beside you, who whispers, they'll be arguing about this for decades, he doesn't sound mad about it. Later, you visit a cultural preservation center where artisans are experimenting with all the ancient methods. They're holding what they call a froth-off, a friendly competition between mulinillo wielders, gourd pourers, and even handshakers using sealed clay vessels. You're handed a scorecard. Each method is judged on height, texture, duration, and taste. You sample them all. Gourd poured, light, airy foam, delicate flavor. Mulinillo, creamy bubbles, rich aroma. Shaken, frothier than expected, a little wild on the tongue. Everyone claps. No one wins, or maybe everyone does. One participant, an elder from Veracruz, leans in and says, froth is like language, doesn't matter how you say it. What matters is you speak from the heart, you nod, thinking of the way foam clings to the rim of a cup like a whisper, the way it collapses softly, like a memory fading just after you wake. You travel next to an archaeological dig in Belize. A team has uncovered ancient chocolate residue in a wide-lipped ceramic pot. The working theory. The vessel's design allowed for efficient pouring from above. One student demonstrates using a replica standing on a ladder, arms shaking slightly. He pours in a perfect, frothy arc. Applause all around. Quirky fact. Some modern chefs now build custom spouted pitchers based on Maya pottery to recreate the pour from height drama tableside. A few even film the action in slow motion for TikTok using the hashtag #CHOCOFroth challenge. You pretend to be annoyed, but secretly love it. At another university, researchers are using laser scanning tools to analyze ceramic wear patterns, trying to identify which surfaces show mulinillo abrasions versus pouring stains. The results are inconclusive. One bowl has both. Debate rages anew. You stop by a traditional kitchen in Oaxaca. The cook, an older woman with laugh lines and flour-dusted hands, uses a mulinillo with elegant ease. She lets you try. You fail, but she grins, takes your hands, and helps you spin the stick just right. Foam starts to form. Everyone fights about how, she says. But the real secret is when. She nods toward the fire. The chocolate is warm, but not too hot. The timing, she says, is what makes the foam rise. You whisper thanks and sip. It's everything. You finish your day at a chocolate museum in Guatemala. In one wing, you see early mulinillos, still bearing the fingerprints of their makers. In another, mural fragments show the high pour in all its watery glory. No winner is declared, just a caption, many hands, one foam. And maybe that's the best answer of all. Foam was never just about height or spin or ritual. It was about transformation of bitter beans into something sublime. Of rawness into ritual, of movement into memory. You sit with that thought a while. Then you lift your cup. No mulinillo, no ladder, no fanfare. Just one slow pour, from your heart to your hands. The foam rises, quietly. The foam in your cup settles just slightly, as if taking a breath before fading into stillness. You're at the end of this long, frothy road, one that started with sacred rituals and gourd bowls and has somehow led to cafes with Wi-Fi and latte art. You're in a quiet coffee shop now, nestled into a soft armchair near the back, where the hum of an espresso machine blends with low jazz and the occasional hiss of steamed milk. A barista calls out a name that's not yours, but you imagine for a second it could be. You sip a mocha. There's foam on your upper lip. It's warm, comforting, a little spicy, and yes, you can thank the ancient Maya for that. Most people drinking this stuff don't know their sipping history. They don't know about the metate grinding, the ritualistic gourd pouring, or the ceremonial significance of froth. They just know it's rich and sweet and perfect for Instagram, but you know better now. You know what's been lost and what still bubbles quietly beneath the surface. The chocolate you're drinking, whether it's in a ceramic cup, a paper sleeve, or a plastic to-go container, carries the echoes of empires. Of warrior brews and divine froth, of mothers stirring in silence by firelight. of hands guiding molinillos passed down through generations. The foam on your latte isn't just cute as part of a 15-century-long love affair with transformation. And the irony, the foam is still there, even though its meaning has shifted. Historians still argue whether modern drinking chocolate is a homage to its indigenous roots or just another reinvention. Whether the molinillo belongs in a museum or a gift shop. Whether those glossy gourmet chocolate bars with Mayan patterns are appreciation or appropriation. But maybe, just maybe, there's room for both. You walk past a display of artisan chocolate bars labeled with single-origin farms places in Chiapas, Tabasco, and Ecuador. The descriptions read like wine labels, hints of citrus, notes of chili, earthy finish. Some even advertise stone-ground, traditional techniques. They're trying. They really are. You buy one. Back outside, the air is cool and a little sticky. Somewhere nearby, a kid laughs over a chocolate milkshake. The cup has whipped cream instead of foam, but still you smile. The essence lingers, not just in texture, but in intention. You remember that the Maya and Aztecs didn't think of chocolate as comfort food. They saw it as ritual, fuel, a living substance. To drink it with froth was to sip the sky. The bubbles were breath, spirit, divine exhale. The act of frothing wasn't just practical, it was prayer with motion. And that's something even a Starbucks can't quite smother. You make your way home with your bar of chocolate, your cup nearly empty, the foam dried in gentle streaks around the inside rim. In your kitchen, you light a candle, the fan hums in the corner soft and rhythmic, like the ancient chant of cacao foam rising. You unwrap the bar carefully, break off a piece. Let it melt slowly on your tongue, and you wonder how many other people, right now, in kitchens or cafes or tiny homes on winding hillsides, are doing the same, stirring, spinning, pouring, sipping. Quirky fact, there's a small but devoted online group that tracks ancient frothing methods and posts side-by-side comparisons of modern drinks made using gourd pour, molinillo, or just a blender. It's half history, half hobby, all heart. They even hold virtual froth nights where participants around the world try different recipes and share the results. Maybe you'll join them, maybe not. But tonight, you're part of something older than hashtags. Older than borders. Older than any single empire or language. You hold the cup to your lips one last time. A tiny whisper of foam touches your mouth and vanishes. Now that we've frothed our way through empires, rituals, and quiet kitchens, let yourself settle into stillness. You've traveled far tonight across centuries, across continents, from jungle canopies dripping with cacao pods to modern mugs warmed by barista steam. Take a deep breath, soft and unhurried. The world outside can wait. Here, you're safe, you're warm. And you're exactly where you need to be. Feel your body grow heavier with each breath, like cacao settling at the bottom of a gently stirred bowl. The hum around you becomes quieter, just a soft vibration now, like wind whispering through leaves, or the low thrum of a molinillo in slow, steady motion. You don't need to remember everything. Not the names, not the debates, not even the techniques. Just the feeling, the simple, ancient joy of transformation. Of bitter becoming sweet, of raw becoming sacred. And maybe, if you listen closely, you'll hear the echo of laughter in a Maya market. Or the hush of a priest raising a foamy bowl toward the stars. Or the soft exhale of a woman pouring from height, her hands steady with generations of knowledge. So let it all go now. The lights are low, the stories have settled. And your journey through chocolate and time has ended, not with a bang, but with a soft, warm sip. Sleep well, dream deep, and may your dreams rise, just like foam in the firelight.